will start in the first section will be basically about how to do the crossing, what to expect on the crossing. And the second presentation then talks about the actual French Polynesia and the area there. And then we'll turn and talk about the next portion of this.
Right.
And anytime you get tired, you just say, okay, I'm enough, and then we'll do it another day, or, you know, if you got something else to do, we can do this.
All right.
Because as you know, I can wax for a long time. All right, so the South Pacific. Oops, something just fell. Just go there. Usually, and I'm going to speak in the first person because this is what we did. It will be very different from you, but this was kind of like our thinking. So a cruise to the Sea of Cortez, which was our shakedown cruise, was a way to squash fears and understand our shortcomings and kindle our thirst for adventure. So when we first took delivery of the boat, we basically went to Mexico and just checked out how our systems work, what we needed. And we found pretty soon we needed solar panels, we needed more shade, and the usual things that you have already gone through. But for us, it was pretty interesting. We got the boat in 2008 and did the Taha'a in 2008, and then wound up doing the Puddle Jump in 2009. So once we got our boat ready, that is now in March of 2009. You can see a lot of jerry cans, and the bikes basically they're on both sides, and that was us ready for the crossing, fueled up, surfboards, dog, what little water line was left. It's the last picture that anybody took from us before we crossed, and it's in La Cruz. That's where we jumped from, and that's what La Cruz looked like back then. And off we went, and I'm a rum line kind of a guy, so we basically said, okay, we're gonna just hold the course. And there were, at that time, the Puddle Jump, there were people who were dipping south first, people who were going more west, and then they were gonna go to south. I decided to go rum line there where I didn't have to worry about it. So that was our course. I don't think we changed much of this, and that was our magnetic course, basically. Occasionally, we had squalls, and our crossing, it was pretty exciting for everybody. We had a real good friend, Kurt, who, if you ever get to Fiji, you will meet. We saw very little. This was probably the only thing we saw. We saw some pilot whales, a floating barbecue, and that was about it. So in 20 days, there was very little sea life to see, and we only saw 3 vessels through for the entire crossing. Then, of course, you will start to see squalls, and since you've done the Panama Posse, you've probably seen squalls, but a lot of people who start from California have never seen a squall, and this is what a squall looks like on radar. So you kind of get a nice idea of what they look like, those little blurbs. And they look really kind of funny at first. And at first we started trying to sail away from them or avoiding them, and then eventually we realized it was pretty cool for us to actually sail through them because they would rinse down our boat. This is what a squall actually looks like on the screen, actually looking out. And then afterwards, of course, they pass and everything is nice and cool again. We had, because we had 4 crew, which is a really good mix for us, we basically had 3 hours on and 9 hours off. And that was a pretty smooth run. We had a couple of squalls, and of course, on the moonless nights, the stars were just absolutely stunning.
Wow.
And our dog, now this is in the ICTC, so that's an area where there is a zone of no wind, and depending on where you get it or where you don't get it, you'll probably spend between 2 days, as much as 6 days motoring through it. Because sometimes the ICTC pulsates it can be as little as 100, 150 miles, and sometimes it's 600 miles wide. And it's a stretch that's just north or south on the equator. And it goes around the either equatorial countercurrent or the equatorial current. And it'll depend really on each year where it pulsates around. And that's something that you'll find out in the weather seminars pretty extensively. So we had enough fuel to motor halfway. I was always a big proponent to have enough fuel on board in case I didn't have enough wind. And it turned out by the time we got there, we used maybe a quarter of what I had predicted we were going to use. So there is definitely wind out there. And then it becomes extremely flat. And so I think the successful passages, and you will see that when you get there, there's basically, people arrive in two ways. Either they jump ship and want to leave the boat immediately, or they're friends for life. And it's all about on crew morale, the eagerness of your spirit, what kind of zeal and zest you have, and how you get along. And that's a little bit in crew selection. If you're just going to do it, the two of you, it's going to be quite tiresome. You can do it, but you know, if you can't take on extra crew, every extra crew, yes, you have to provision and feed them, but ultimately it makes your passage a lot easier. So keep that in mind. So we had every day at 5 o'clock, we had, you know, perfectly set tables and meals, and we had soft cocktails and a wine. Suzanne was very happy cooking in there. And obviously the big thing you have to do is at the equator, you have to do the Royal Court of the Realm of Neptune, and where you basically become a polywog to shellback. And that's, you basically, as the captain, get to run a trial and accuse everybody. In my case, I would accuse them of not respecting my music selections and, you know, and other things. But you get to basically accuse the crew and then give them a subpoena and then actually throw them in the water or jump into and with them. There's different rituals. People dress up as Neptune. It's something really fun to do. I also tried to do the thing with the, to see if the water would go the other way, but that didn't turn out to work. You know, the vortex of that.
Right.
It was just
South of
fun.
the equator.
Yeah. But we had big celebration there. You know, with the handheld GPS, took pictures, and had a good fun. At the time, we were running a single sideband net. It was hit or miss, and we had a pretty good propagation, but a lot of people had problems with single sidebands. So it's not as easy as it looks, and I'm sure you have experience with it. It was pretty good for us, but some people only had satellite phones. Other people didn't have single sideband at all. I think it's still a good investment to have on board if you have it.
We have an M802 on board.
Okay, perfect. So you're good. All right. Then, of course, stunning sunsets, because you're always sailing towards the sun setting direction. And then after 20 days, I got to yell Lano, and there it is on the horizon, right? So it's the first little rock. It's a little out. It's actually not even on the main island. It was just a little rock north of it. And we then sailed in. And this is what you arrive in. And this is French Polynesia.
Is this Fatu Hiva or Hiva-oa?
That's Hiva-oa. Hiva-oa is typically where people make landfall, and we're going to zoom in here. So French Polynesia is basically divided in there's 5 sections, but 3 sections we visited. French Polynesia in the north has the Marquesas Islands, and there's 15 of them. There's about 10,000 people that live there, and they're just basically volcanic islands without an outer reef. So if you expect crystal clear waters, that's not the location to be in, because that's much more dramatic. So those are very steep, mountainous islands. They're very dramatic and very beautiful nevertheless. On the right side, you see basically the pilot charts for wind directions. So that gives you kind of like an idea of how you want to travel through this area, with predominant winds coming from the southeast, obviously. After that, you'll get to the Tuamotus. There's 88, I think there's 88 of those. Those are sunken volcanoes. And basically, those are the ones that have crystal clear waters in the middle. That's where the black pearls are. This is where it's absolutely beautiful. And then, of course, the Society Islands are the ones that also are similar to the Marquesas, but in addition, many of them have an outer ring. And those are the combinations of beautiful views and crystal clear waters. So we go through those in a second. That's just an overview from topography and what it kind of means. The Marquesas, this was our route through the Marquesas. So as we came in, we went through Hiva. Then we went over to Tahuata, which is just a little island to the southwest of it. Then we went down to the quintessential Fatu Hiva anchorage. We went up to Huka, which is definitely a beautiful, interesting island. Then over to Nuku Hiva, and then down to Toau. So that was our plan through the Marquesas, and we spent about a month in that region alone.
What are the distances here? Oh, there we go. Thank you.
There you go.
That's easy.
Again, fairly easy, small islands. So I'll show you a couple of things. This was us arriving at Hiva at Atuana. This is where you actually check into French Polynesia. That is where you can get fuel. You can get small provisions. They have small stores there, but don't expect a big supermarket. There's not that many things there, but they have just the basics for you, and it's also quite a magnificent looking place. And you know, because you're used to Mexico, you're used to North America, this is a very different culture, and that's very exciting. So this is Kurt, and one of the things that we had going that year, on the right side, you see Ewok from another boat, and he's handing you the French baguette. So that was always a welcome gift, and that's probably one of the cheapest things you can buy in French Polynesia is the French baguette, right?
And currency, do you show up with currency? Is there, how do you deal with that initially?
ATM, they have ATMs there. You can buy a few ahead, but you will not need it. And by the time you get there, there's an ATM in that town.
Okay.
And also most of the places there take credit cards. So just bring Visa. And one of the things I always recommend, if you have a bank account, open 3 bank accounts with the same bank. They won't charge you more, and get 3 different ATMs. So in case you lose one, you can just move money around electronically.
Okay.
So that's us celebrating first night, and Kurt's was a very accomplished captain. I was the newbie at this, but I felt like I made it. And then all of a sudden, all the other boats started coming on board, because if you're a catamaran, people just show up, right? So
yeah.
So that was just a lot of fun. And I promised Suzanne the first time we got there, we're going to have dinner on land. And of course, that didn't happen. Basically, they started coming over. And because we're all single sidebands, we were just shooting the shit and having a good time.
See, that's your fault, because you have such a nice boat, and it's so open to, if you have a small boat, then you don't have that problem.
No, you go to somebody else's bigger boat. Yeah, I know.
There you go.
Yeah, but you know, so I think we had 3 dogs on board. I don't know how many kids. It was like 30 people. People were making out. People were fighting. It was perfect, right? It's a perfect night. And that's Suzanne looking just like, I just wanted to get a meal on land, but she didn't get one. So the next morning, you start seeing some of the local culture. They're big into the outrigger races. They definitely do not sell to you. It's a very different culture from Mexico. They kind of keep to themselves. And as I'm sure as you're following the blogs, they are not necessarily all that welcome, but they will treat you cordially if you treat them. It's a warrior culture there. You know, these guys this is where some of the most striking tattoos come from in the world, Marquesan tattoos. And this is basically, we then rented a car and with a tour guide went to see the island. You can go foraging into the jungle and actually, you know, get your own bananas. This again on the north side of Hiva. It's just some beautiful bays. And then after a few days, I recommend you head over just a little south from there to the island of Tahuata. On the west side, there's a bunch of actually beautiful little sandy beaches, and which more clearer water there, as you can see. This is Suzanne just paddling around. That's also where you start seeing manta rays. Again, just more beautiful sunsets. And Tahuata has 3 or 4 really anchorages, and I've added you to Good Nautical, so you'll be able to see all those anchorages in there. There's lots of cultural aspects to it. There's a couple of really interesting statues also in Hiva. And the waters, if they're dark, you know, we don't tend to swim that much in dark waters because there's definitely sharks and big sharks around in that area.
Wow.
This is another anchorage in Tahuata. It's just beautiful. And because it's the first island group, you will get afternoon showers. This is our friend Mike and Veronica. And again, we just had a lot of friends over. And if you look in the back, those bananas, which we picked up earlier, they become kind of yellow. One word, if you pick word of advice, if you pick up a stack of these, put something on the bottom because the sap from bananas is really hard to get out of the gel coat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So again, there's lovely little islands there. And then we sailed down. We left early morning in order to get to Fatu Hiva, which is the quintessential South Pacific anchorage, as you can see.
Bay of Virgins.
Yes, Bay of Virgins. And really monumental, just towering rock formations. A really rainforest, if you think of it. A lot of waterfalls. There's a nice hike up to a waterfall. There's lots of statues there. They do a little bit of copra and coconut production there. It's very rainy there, and it's a very dramatic sight to see. This is their locals, you know, feasting their little pigs on coconuts, which means if you eat pork there, it has a little coconut flavor to it. They got a lot of horses, nice little jungly looking things. Excuse me. So that's kind of like the southern part of the Marquesas, and then we went over to Uapau, which Uahuka. Uahuka is an island where there is more goats and horses than humans. There's maybe 2 or 3 populated areas. It's quite dramatic, as you can see, very beautiful coast. And this is, at the time, this was the Aranui 3. That is a supply ship and half cruise ship. So we basically found the best anchorage in there, and then he shows up and he starts saying, you got to move out of there. It's like, I'm sorry, first anchor. So he had to anchor further out, but that was okay. And this is basically how they take tourists in and out of town. Uahuka is interesting because they have a vocational school. The locals this is Kurt actually trying to surf with the locals, and they were kind of welcoming to him. There's also some beautiful, just beautiful islands with nothing but birds.
Wow.
And just some really stunning formations, as you can see.
Yeah.
Then, you know, anchorages that we found along the way. This is before we go over to Nuku Hiva, which is the main island. All the major little islands there have little airports. So if you do have crew, they are able to fly back to Tahiti and then back to the States if you need to do crew swaps. Just keep that in mind. The charting there is extraordinarily well and good and accurate. So you actually don't need satellite charts there. You will need in a Tuamotus or a sharp eye, and we'll get to that because of all the coral heads that you have inside the motus. This is Nuku Hiva. This is the bay. As you can see, when we were there were lots of boats in there. There's some really nice cultural places. There's 2 or 3 decent supermarkets. Nothing great yet, but more like tiendas that you're used to. And of course, extremely much pricier than you would ever expect. It's almost like shell shock by when you get there and start buying things. Okay, so these are some of the statues that they have there. Very interesting art. Beautiful bay, and you know it's one of the quintessential places that you can get to. It's just after that we spent probably about maybe 3-4 days there. They have early morning markets where you can get produce, and get produce there because that's the biggest produce place that you'll be able to get it from. Fresh veggies and pamplemousse and oranges, etc. Because the Tuamotus, which is the next island group that you'll go to, doesn't have the ability to grow much because they're basically sand ring atolls. So they have to bring everything in, making it that much pricier. So the southern island there on the way out was Uapau. From there, we basically then did a stunt down. We stocked up. We have nettings with pamplemousse, oranges, and fresh fruits and veggies. And we jumped down from the Marquesas now down to the archipelago, the Tuamotus. Okay, so it's a little forward of the wind, but it's certainly doable. It was 420 miles to get to our first atoll that we picked, and we picked Raroria. Raroria is, which is really interesting because when you approach it, this is what it looks like. It looks like little palm trees coming out of the water. And this is, as you can see, there's no big mountains. It's literally a ring of sand where the palm trees grow on top of. So this is the exact view from a chart plotter. So we're 8 miles out and all you see is palm trees, right? There's no land. And there's also very little radar signature. So you have maybe a couple of things here, although it's a pretty big island if you look at it, right? So this is then a satellite chart of what it looks like. We went to Raroria because it was also the landing site of the Kon-Tiki or Taha'a. So there's actually a monument on this side, on the east side, where he actually made landfall with his Kon-Tiki back in the, I think, 70s.
Right.
This is what it actually looks up a little closer, and you will make your way through the pass. So that making your way through the pass is obviously timing yourself to slack tide. The problem is the Tuamotus are pretty spread out, so you kind of have to interpolate timing for high or low tide or high tide when you want to go in and out.
And what are you using for your tidal charts there?
I used my built-in Raymarine. I looked for the nearest tidal station, and then I looked for the furthest one in either direction. I kind of like added and subtracted time from there based on that.
Sure.
Now, going through the pass will only take you 10 minutes, and as long as you do it within the half an hour, then there isn't a big problem going through it. And basically, once you're on the inside, it's flat calm. Again, so for us was basically a 3-day passage to get there, and we timed it so we would be there at high tide to move in and out. And so, as you can see, this is the soil there, so not much can grow on that in Raroria, but it's a beautiful little place. They got nice little churches. They have an airport. This is the locals' boat that they keep out of the water with this nice little contraption. And they're very friendly there. They don't see a lot of folks coming in and out. They have solar panels. You know, they're part of French culture. And the snorkeling and diving in that area is just superb because the water is basically crystal clear down to 50 feet. These are what they call the most Instagrammable views, basically. And, you know, so you can sharks just swimming by. And this was, we spent a whole month in the Tuamotus. If I do it over again, I'll probably spend a whole season in the Tuamotus alone. But it's just so stunning. This is going back out, so you have little water eddies. This is us approaching Makemo, which is the next atoll that we went to. And as you can see, this is 30, 40, 50 feet down, totally crystal clear waters, right? And they have windmills. They are not a poor society. They have a lot of support from mainland France. And you can basically pick any part, just run onto the beach with your dinghy and then go explore. The only thing that you'll have there is coconut crabs running away from you. So it's a basic, this is what most of these atolls look like. These rings are maybe a mile wide, maybe half a mile wide. So they're kind of beautiful little areas, stunning sky formations. And you start seeing how you have to look at where the reefs are and where you should anchor, right? So obviously in front of us is a reef. You don't want to go through that. You don't want to anchor on that. You don't want to catch your anchor on that. Right. So a lot of times people put people up on the spreaders, or you only want to actually anchor or go around there when there's nice weather, or if you have a prior path through it, and if the sun is basically coming from behind, so it's not blinding you. So it takes a little time to get used to. So we tend to move around 9, 10 in the morning, anchor up, and you want the sun be basically overhead at high noon, but you don't want to move in the afternoons, because if you're moving westward, you're moving towards the sun, so your visibility will be ruined.
Sure. We put mast steps on our mast, which will be nice to be able to get up and down.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So does Chelsea drive, or you drive?
I usually drive, but we both.
All right. Yeah, good. And obviously the key there is absolutely high quality $300 pair of polarized glasses. They make a total difference in their visibility there. So the best ones you can get, definitely get them. And we have two. I use brown and blue lenses, depending on what type of sky you got, right? You can anchor anywhere along those ridges based on looking at coral heads, and this is what coral heads look like, right? There's a coral head right there.
Sure.
There's one here. So you always want to look for a sandy spot and give yourself enough swing room. We tend to, because we're a cat, we tend to anchor further in. A lot of monohulls tended to anchor further out, but they had ample chain. So make sure you got 300-400 feet of chain on board, because you may use it there. This is actually a moonrise. I mean, you can just see it's just absolutely beautiful weather there. And then here was one of our buddy boats arriving. Follow you, follow me.
You know them.
Yeah, Alan and Rena. We buddy boated with them. I think he followed us for a long time because we had a functioning water maker and he didn't, but that was all right. Anyhow, so they were coming in. And sometimes you get these squalls. So obviously you want to be anchored down in those conditions, because you wouldn't want to move during them, or approaching an atoll during that. So even if you time everything right, you can still sometimes get slammed by a squall, which means you really got to hold off for sometimes 12 hours in order to make it into an atoll. It's just the price of entry, basically. Then we do something called drift diving. So basically hang onto your dinghy and you run through the passes as the tides empty them out or fill them up. And you can just look, because most of the life that you can see is under you in these passes, which are sometimes 100 feet deep, but there's everything in there: sharks, dolphins, turtles. And you just hold on to your dinghy and get washed out, and you run the dinghy back in. Big sharks. And sometimes the winds pick up in the afternoon, so you'll have some pretty interesting, weather there. And then we basically sailed on to the next island. So from Makemo, we went to Fakarava. Fakarava is known for the southern entrance, has a lot of sharks, so it's really interesting. And we started meeting more and more people along the way who had come either directly from Cabo, who were not part of the Puddle Jump. So we started making friends with other cruises that you will see along the way. The French maintain their navigational aids pretty well, as you can see. They're just working away on little markers there. You can do some great windsurfing. You will have trade winds there. So it blows 20 to 25, gusting to 30, and occasional you get some storms coming through the area. So you can always pick your anchorage based on the prevailing wind conditions. And also we always try to find a spot behind a reef that would give us less of the wind waves. Because some of these atolls are, 10, 15 mile wide, so it creates a lot of wind fetch. Not swell, but fetch, certainly. And then there's basically some ruins in Fakarava. Southern Fakarava is really pretty. This is us relaxing, and you basically say, okay, at what time do I have to swap out my legs? Right? Lots of sharks, lots of parties with other boats that you have there, lots of friends coming over. This is another area, Toau. We did the outer anchorage. a lot of these places have black pearl farms. So if you have things to trade, meaning alcohol, which is what they're interested in, you'll be able to get some black pearls for alcohol or just buy them locally from them. This is Apataki Entrance. It's somebody built a little house on stilts there. Some of the local kids, real nice. Kurt went surfing on the the southwestern pass. Then the local surfers were quite welcoming. They were not selfish there at all. And then they always have a town dock because that's how they reprovision. So that's where you can sometimes get fuel. A lot of these places will not have a fuel dock, but so that's why the jerry cans come in handy. I recommend you have at least 10 jerry cans on board, which means you can grab 50 gallons. That means a lot of these places, all the locals will have pickup trucks. So you can put 10 jerry cans in the back, run to the gas station, fill it up with diesel, bring it back, and then fill up. And you can also, most of the time, fit 10 jerry cans in a dinghy. This is what it looks like on the inside of an atoll when it's completely calm. As you can see, it's beautiful. And you have your own little private islands within these atolls, which are just stunning too. A little shot of my old dog Vienna, and just beautiful, areas there. Yeah, there's your Anchorage. Perfect. Swim around, go to the beach, hang out. Yeah. Internet has been improving. At the time there, we used a lot of satellite internet time. So I think you still will need a combination of Wi-Fi, satellite, and then local cell phone. But obviously every year it increases. Every one of those atolls will have a cell tower. And then when it gets crowded, meaning another boat shows up, you just leave, you move on. Again, going out to the pass, we just timed it to be with slack tide. Oops. Sorry. And then this is the next atoll. This one is Rangiroa. This is a more commercially oriented atoll. There's some beautiful restaurants there, and they cater a little bit more towards tourists. I participated in some of the cultural dances. So this is me with the coconut boys and girls. There's some really beautiful dances. And that's where I took my diving lessons. This is me with a French diving instructor, which was a quite interesting experience to be, you to pay to be insulted by, but it's fun. You don't swim so well. Well, luckily I'm here to learn how to dive. On it went. But one of the nice things about the Rangiroa top dive, you can dive with live, with live dolphins, and so it's really a beautiful sight. And I was lucky because there was a underwater photographer with a $30,000 rig with him, and because I'm not that good of a diver, I mean every one of those shots because I'm higher up. Anyhow, so it was just really fantastic to be there. Nice. Then, as you leave the Tuamotus from Rangiroa, this is these are the this is Tahiti, Huahine, Raiatea, Taha'a, Bora, and Maupiti and Maupilia. So those are this is the Society Islands basically then. And there's the Windward Islands and then the Leeward Islands, Tahiti being the Windward Island. The difference is to get to Tahiti, well, between Tahiti and Moorea is 8 miles. Huahine is 80 miles, 21 miles over to Raiatea. Raiatea is the mooring space, so that's where a lot of charter boats come from.
And what is the island south here between the long passage between Tahiti and
this one? Tahiti?
Yeah, I can't quite read.
Moorea.
No. You going to the left? Yes. So just
I didn't go there. Sorry. Let me take a look at what that one is. Maybe Maupiti or Maupilia, one of those.
With our slower boat, that might break up the day. I mean, be 2 day sails.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Again, I didn't. We'll take a look at that in a cruising guide or something. So this is basically Tahiti. It's a town. You have large supermarkets there. You have McDonald's there. You got chandleries there. It's a port. It's got a huge international airport. So that's Tahiti. And that's where, you run into people that you've met earlier. This is Eric. He had his Marquesas tattoo. And then there's actually Ernie's in the back. He was on another boat that we met later on in Fiji. So you'll start meeting people that you will see throughout the South Pacific, because there's only about 2,000 cruisers in the South Pacific, and a good deal of them are from Australia and New Zealand as you get further west. So you tend to kind of know each other there. It's a much smaller group. In Marina Taina, the outlets are now no longer 110, they're 220 and 240. They're at 60 hertz, and you're going to need a transformer. And I recommend you figure out a transformer or boat charger that works on 220 here, because they basically will charge you 2-3 times the value because it's got to get there. So now is the time for you to source a version of a transformer that you'll feel happy with. Okay. So that's one of the marinas. There's 2 or 3 other marinas there as well. They do a lot of outrigger races. These are small outrigger races compared to what they do in the western part of the Pacific. And then we participated in the Moorea regatta. So every year there's a regatta that goes from Tahiti to Moorea and deals with the locals. There's a lot of local markets, a lot of local culture. It's just stunning culturally and just very pretty. This is Suzanne and Rena and Megan in downtown Tahiti, right by the market. And this is what the downtown Marina Quay looks like, everybody flying their flags, and you start seeing lots of boats from different nations there. This is a boat from New Zealand. They were on their way back to New Zealand, finishing their circumnavigation. So you'll see a lot of more international vessels there.
Sure.
Then they also have these faways. This is one of their big cultural exhibits. They tend to time in so when most boats are there, there are these huge cultural exhibits and dances that take place there. And basically all the islands compete for every year for the prize. And they do all the local sports. This is one of the, heavy stone lifting and all the other things. And then the little markets have lots of little icons and trinkets and shells and designs to sell. Friday nights, they have the outdoor, these little cars pull up, and you basically have your outdoor markets and where you can eat. They got a lot of Chinese and mixed in with Vietnamese, basically all French culture kind of like collides there in the South Pacific. You can basically pick and eat and have little food stands there. Then we went over to Moorea. This is Cook's Bay on the outer side. This is, again, just sailing across. And at the time, they had arranged for a nice Tahitian welcome. Things are a little different now, as you know, but I think they'll go back to normal within 6 months, I believe so. It's just currently with what's, yeah, it's. Yeah. So we basically just sail in there. This is Moorea again. This is Okinawa Bay. And on the bottom, you see these beautiful hotel rooms, they're between $5,000 to $1,000 a night, and you're just anchoring in front of them for free. There's lots of little anchorages and beautiful little spots. And, Tahiti prides itself as being the most Instagrammable kind of a place on the planet. So yeah, it is what it is. Absolutely beautiful. And this is when the fleet was in. I think there's now many more anchoring restrictions on the way. And I'm sure the good news is we don't have to fight them. The French nationals that are there will fight them for us. So don't get involved. Sure. It's not our fight to pick. Right. Diving is spectacular there. Super yachts will show up, anchor right next to you. And this is the Bali High Yacht Club there. And then they do, during the Moorea Regatta, they do different little events and, how to pick a coconut, how to grind it, and you can participate in all of this. Moorea also has, because it caters to a lot of tourists, a lot of known spots where you can play with the stingrays and feed them. One of our favorite islands, however, was Huahine, and that's a little bit further up. That was that 80-mile jump up. That is absolutely stunning, beautiful, and not as commercially developed with hotels as some of the other islands. It's got an outer ring, so it's beautiful, beautiful anchoring, well charted, and you can basically tuck in. So you can see these are the anchorages from the island looking down towards the reef, and these are just absolutely beautiful spots. Again, super yachts will follow you. They have some really interesting excavations from the Tahitian kings. They have some really interesting archaeological sites too. We visited a couple of those. Huahine is really I think it's called the King's Island. And these are some of the inner lagoons. This would actually be an inner lagoon is considered this particular bay is considered a hurricane hole in the South Pacific. So keep Huahine in mind if you're going to spend the season there. This is Seth on another boat, and he started to surf there. And that's basically our boat at anchor right there, on the inner side of the reef. Beautiful sunsets, and then on the very far end there, you actually see the towering mountain of Bora there. So you have some beautiful sights there. And as you can see, nothing is really, really far away. It's kind of visible, and it's very beautiful. It's well maintained, well marked. If there's coral reefs that you're not supposed to anchor in, you will be informed of that. And just beautiful little sky formations. Then we sailed over towards, this is Raiatea. Again, this is where several marinas are. There's big supermarkets, and there's a charter fleet. So from there, from Raiatea itself is an island that has lots of excavations as well. You can anchor many, many spots there. And again, looking over the horizon, over the reef towards Bora. And then this is us actually approaching Bora. And this is the pass that you will sail into. And if you go to the left, you will go to the Bora Yacht Club with moorings, who are sometimes maintained and sometimes not maintained. And then to the right, you can go to Bloody Mary's in the main bay. And that's basically us on a mooring ball and at the Bora Yacht Club. Over there is Bloody Mary's. When we were there, you could just pick up a mooring as long as you went in and had something to eat or drink, and that's one of those must-do things in French Polynesia. That's the dock that they provide, so you can actually tie up your dinghy. We actually brought our bikes out and then biked around the island. It was actually quite nice. Then we had a 4th of July party there. It was an epic party on Wayward Wind, and with one of our British friends who wanted to claim back the Americas. Actually, that was his thing. So, again, this Bora Yacht Club. This is what it looked like. Every few years, storm goes through and it gets rebuilt. But it's just an absolutely beautiful little spot. So that kind of wraps up the journey from Mexico through the Marquesas into the Tuamotus and then to the Society Islands. So depending on your timing, this takes you at least 3 to 4 months to kind of complete if you're doing it fast, right?